We often hear near-death experiences being described as leaving your body and then observing your body and its surroundings from a corner in the room and from a vantage point which is distinct from your body. What I find interesting about those descriptions is that they actually don't make sense, and yet none of us really notices it. When you tell such a story, you can either believe it or disbelieve it. You can put it away as humbug and as nonsense and something that you don't trust in, as a hallucination. But in both cases, those who affirm such stories and believe in them, and those who reject them, in both cases, people agree that this would be a meaningful way of putting things. They just, in one case, don't believe it, in the other, they insist it's true, and it tells you something about the afterlife and existence after death. I find this interesting because if you think about it for a minute, you notice something is wrong here. You notice that if you ask yourself the question, why would I be above my body in a specific point in the room when I don't have eyes anymore? Your eyes are not going with you when you're leaving your body. Your eyes are still there on the table, being operated on. And yet, while you have no eyes, you perceive the world as if you were looking through somebody's eyes. You perceive the world as if you were still embodied, as if you had a body. And notice how people don't find this strange. We are so locked into our experience of embodiment. We take it so much for granted that we don't pay attention to it. We take it to be something that is basically the only meaningful way of defining consciousness. And when you take aspects of the body away, the thing is that our usual descriptions of how consciousness would look like suddenly lose their meaning. Again, when you don't have eyes, why would your perspective be restricted to looking from a limited point-like position into the world? Why wouldn't you see at the same time from several vantage points? Why wouldn't you see everything? Why wouldn't you perceive not only the room, but everything that is there in the entire hospital? Why not the entire city? Why not the entire universe? Why would you limit yourself to an embodied perspective when you're not bound to embodiment anymore? And this goes further, because all the experiences that we usually describe and associate with consciousness make usually only sense in the context of embodied experience. Take fear. Fear doesn't really make sense when you don't have a skin that can be harmed, right? When you don't have the inside-outside distinction anymore, when you're disembodied, what would you be afraid of? How would fear even make sense as an experience? What would touch you? What would be the boundary between you and your surroundings? Because with the human body, it's very clear. The skin designates some form of boundary. And touching your skin gives you a specific form of experience. You couldn't have that either as a spirit that is disembodied. You couldn't have the experience of touch. You couldn't have the experience of fear. Fear wouldn't make sense. There is no body to be destroyed, to cease to exist. Would you experience anger? These are emotions that we share with the animal realm, and again are also embodied. They make sense only in the context of a body, and not really in the form of something that is disembodied, and something that is alocal, that is not localized. I think this is an important topic, and people gloss over this, but it is an expression of how self-forgotten we are, of how we don't really see our experience as experience. We don't really look at it, observe it carefully, and then ask the question, what are its special characteristics? And in which context does it make sense to project it into the world? How is it specifically different from something that is void of consciousness? And when you're blind to your own experience, you assume it everywhere else. You basically have no trouble at all to live in a form of animism where you project your own experience and take it for granted as being the vantage point that pretty much is given to everyone else, including machines, This is why we can easily ask the question, we think we're asking a meaningful question, is the machine thinking? Is there somebody there in the machine? This is a meaningless question. But we're so self-forgotten and so take our vantage point of embodiment and experience for granted that we think there isn't even an issue of asking the question whether something, a machine, which is an ascription, nothing is intrinsically a machine. They are, as Searle puts it, something that needs you as the observer to make them to become a machine. We still feel it's not a contradiction at all to ask the question, well, could a machine be thinking, right? This is just as meaningful a statement as the claim about the out-of-body experience. The out-of-body experience might be real, right? But it most certainly does not speak for your spirit literally leaving your body. Because if it did, it wouldn't be spatially bound anymore. It wouldn't have eyes. It wouldn't have a mouth to speak. It wouldn't have a singular localized position. And if that spirit had an experience, it would most certainly not be the experience of an embodied organism. It would be something very different. It would not be something that is typical of our human-like consciousness, which is having drives, having volition, having fears, having experiences, sensations, dreams. None of those things make sense. Whatever that might be, whatever that form of consciousness might be, the disembodied consciousness, it doesn't make sense for it to look very much like our own embodied consciousness. And I think this is pretty much obvious. I mean, you don't have to think like, this is not rocket science. You just look at it and think about the features of human consciousness and how they're actually embedded in embodiment and don't make sense without embodiment. And then the whole picture shifts, because then the position is not whether you affirm these experiences or you reject them, but by becoming aware of how meaningless such a statement actually is, in the sense that of implying to know something truly metaphysical, in the sense of going beyond our sensual world or world of experience, of how little you can actually then say about something that is otherworldly, if you want, in a meaningful way. It just, our meanings that we apply basically lose all their grip the soon we start speaking and take ourselves seriously about a world that is radically altered from the present world of experiences.